Stories and give a cheer to all the incredible athletes out here today at the California International Marathon.
All right, we're here again. I ran the California International Marathon in 2024, which is this year. And I'm happy to say that I have redeemed myself from last year's 2023 performance. And if you watch that video there, you know that I performed in a subpar way, didn't exactly meet my expectations there, but I think this time around, even though it was a non-PR race for me, I'm happy that I finished and performed the way that I did. And I finished with a time of 2:49:53, which was just about 32 seconds away from my personal record from Grandma's Marathon this past summer. But ultimately, I'm very happy of the way I performed and really executed well on this race. In this video, I'm just going to be talking about the recap of the weekend, how I executed the race, how it was leading up to the marathon, and how training went. The race video will be separate. I think it's already up already, but in this video, I'm just recapping and just chit-chatting about all the things that I felt and experienced during the race weekend.
No PB? Okay, yeah, but I think...
So leading up into this marathon, I only had about like 7 or 8 weeks of training. I was coming off a 100K Kodiak race, trail race that's in Big Bear, and I also made a video about that. But I was coming off that huge, I'll say, training block and also race that I did. So I really only had 7 or 8 weeks to train properly in terms of marathon paces for CIM. Kodiak was in October, and then I gave myself about a week or two. I wasn't sure how my body would recover from that. Surprisingly, it recovered well, so I was back onto the training block for CIM within a week or so. So I really had about 7 to 8 weeks of training. I was hoping that the Kodiak 100K is carrying over to this training block as well, really being that aerobic based foundation that I typically start off with in a training block. And so during the training, this time I basically jumped straight in to threshold workouts. Usually I have 3 training, I guess, cycles within a training block. The first one's the aerobic base building foundation, and then next one is threshold, and then the VO2 max, and then taper. And so this time I just jumped in straight into the threshold because I wanted to pick up the pace and really get my legs turning over quickly again so I can prepare myself for CIM. And during the 7 or 8 weeks, I was really targeting a pace of a sub 2:45 marathon. And so I was training in those pace ranges. So during my long runs, I would be training in about the 6:15 per mile pace to ensure that I'm a little bit faster than the sub 2:45 pace. And I really only had, I want to say, 3 or 4 quality sessions of these marathon pace long workouts. And so was hoping for more, but I was really trying to rush things and put in that work as soon as possible so that my body gets primed up for race day. And then for taper, I didn't do my typical 3 weeks of taper, obviously, because again, I wanted to put in as much fitness building work in this build as quickly as possible and efficiently as possible. And so I gave myself 2 weeks of tapering to recover. And my biggest quality long marathon workout was the, 2 weeks before the CIM race. And so that was my last 22-mile run. And that, honestly, I hit the paces, but again, I felt pretty gassed out, which is fine as well. So throughout this training block, I really was targeting that sub 2:45 marathon completion. And so I hit all the paces well. I was able to put in the work. I did as much as I could during the training block. During the taper weeks, I didn't feel as much recovering as I would like. Typically, I start to feel very clean or very refreshed throughout the taper weeks leading up to the marathon, and really eager to move my legs and run. This time around, I felt a lot of, niggles around my legs. I was very hyper aware. I wasn't sure if these were like time impacting niggles, but at the same time, I didn't worry too much. I was hoping to recover as much as possible, put my legs up as much as possible. And so leading up to the marathon weekend, I was a little bit doubtful, but at the same time, staying positive and hoping for the best in terms of recovery. Marathon weekend came, and my brother and I flew into Sacramento 2 days before race day, which was on a Friday. We took the early morning flights, rented our car, and basically my carb loading session, I'll call it that, started on Friday, 2 days out. And that morning I also ate a bagel. And then once we landed, we got our coffee fix. Also got a waffle as well. But throughout these 2 days leading up to the marathon, I was really trying to load up on the carbs, trying to get in that around 600 grams of carbs into my body. And these would be clean carbs and nothing too fatty, not too much protein, and not too much fiber as well, as this has showed positive results for my stomach lately. So I tried to stick to that sort of strategy in terms of carb loading. And I did eat a lot those past days, and I felt gross, which again is a good sign for me. Whenever I feel gross, I tend to run faster or perform better. And so eating 600 grams a day was definitely a challenge, but at the same time, much needed in terms of carb loading and racing well in the marathon. Then race day came. I woke up at 3 a.m. of that morning, and I put in another 72 grams of carbs, ate my bagel and a Morton 320. I noticed one of the comments in the other video say that it was a savage way of eating a bagel, which yes, it was. It definitely was. There was no, and it's not typically how I eat bagels. There wasn't any toaster. I didn't have a knife for spreading the peanut butter. I didn't want to buy a full jar of peanut butter either, so I got one of those squeezing peanut butter, and there was no toaster, so I had to basically spread the peanut butter on top and just bite the bagel as is, or not on top, but it's pre-cut, so I tried to slide it in those 2 loaves of bagels and just eat it that way. Not optimal, very savage, yes I know, but it had to be done in order for me to get into carbs and then actually enjoy that bagel to a certain degree, and so that's what I did. I also had 5 gels that I was gonna have on me. Gonna eat a gel every 4 to 5 miles or so. These are human gels, something that I typically use on race day or my long runs. 3 electrolytes ones and then 2 normal ones. And I also carried a soft flask containing some noon hydration electrolytes. So I was gonna carry that with me this time, and it has been a game changer for me these past marathons. I think last year I didn't have anything like that. I didn't have any soft flasks on me, and I was definitely a little bit underhydrated, and so I am using this hydration strategy, and it kept me quite hydrated this time around. Usually I end up drinking it all around mile 13, but I ended up drinking it all around mile 16. Heading out 4:40. After I ate my breakfast, I headed out to the shuttle bus at around 4:40 a.m. It was just a brisk walk to the shuttle bus. Our hotel that we booked was very close to a shuttle stop, and so it was only about like a 3-minute walk to the shuttle bus, so it was nice. So left around 4:40, and the buses left pretty timely at 5 a.m. And unfortunately, my bus got a little bit lost, which is fine as well. The people in the bus were really positive, really encouraging, and just helping out the bus driver a little bit. And eventually we got to the starting line, albeit not at the typical drop-off area. We ended up being dropped off at the backside of the starting line, which was where all the porta potties were, which I'm not complaining as well, because being dropped off there means that you have more access to the porta potties quickly, because the back end of the porta potties lines were almost non-existent during that time. Got dropped off around like 6 a.m. so we even had some extra time left. because the race starts at 7. So I did my duties there, was able to get in another number 1, and then I waited another 40 to 45 minutes before the race started. Temperatures were supposed to be pretty cold. It was, I think, around the lower 40s degrees Fahrenheit. It didn't feel as cold as I remember it or was expecting. I had my throw jackets on. I had sweats this time. I also had my gloves I was planning to throw. So it was actually pretty comfortable. I didn't take it off until almost like 5 minutes before the start of the race. And instead of a horn this time, they had like a nice jingle. I'll call it jingle. It was very pleasant to hear. I prefer that instead of a loud horn. But it was very nice and a new twist to these kinds of races.
You're crushing.
Runners to your mark.
So like I said before, I was training for a sub 2:45 marathon. So that, roughly comes out to be around a 6:18, 6:19 minute per mile pace. And so my race strategy was based off that. Even though my expectations coming into the race, especially with how I was feeling, all the niggles that I was kind of feeling or hyper aware of, I was very mindful of that goal. I was expecting at least a PR, hopefully, but at the same time, I was also hoping for, maybe that one good race where I, again, feel really well, really fast, and end up going sub 2:45, because I've hit those paces before in training, but I understood the conditions that I wasn't exactly feeling my top condition that I typically would feel. And so even though my goal, I guess, a goal was sub 2:45, I wasn't expecting myself to hit sub 2:45, to be honest. My pace strategy was based on that, but I think I realized a PR is something that is more realistic. And so I set my mind on at least a PR with a hopeful mind of getting 2:45. So my race strategy was first 3 miles was going to be very conservative for a sub 2:45, because I don't want what happened last year to happen again. So the first 3 miles was at a 6:30s minute per mile pace, around there, the first 3 miles. And then the next 7 miles up to mile 10, these would speed up to 6:20s minute per mile pace, which I've done pretty comfortably throughout training. And then at mile 10, from there then on for another 12 miles, I would kick into that marathon pace gear, where I would hopefully be hitting around 6:15 minute per mile paces. And then the final 5K, final 3.12 miles was just threshold, put in all you got, and hopefully aim around like the 6 minute per mile pace. So that was the goal. So I wasn't exactly too confident about this race strategy, but at the same time, I was understanding of it. So I basically gave myself, this guide. I'll say it's not even a strategy, it's a race guideline. And I basically went off that, and then at around mile 3 or to mile 5, I would reevaluate, because I think at that time, that's really when I start to know whether or not this was going to be a fast race or a slow race or PB race for me. And I think, and as I talk about it more, I'll realize that it wasn't really a sub 2:45 condition for me, or even maybe a PR race for me as well. The race started promptly at 7 a.m. and I went off as per the strategy in the first 3 miles in the 6:30s paces. And I finished those 3 miles in these are Strava times, so it might be a little bit off from the actual race results in terms of 5K splits. But my first 3 miles was 6:33, 6:34, and 6:30. So pretty solid, bang on times at the time. But after doing those 3 miles, I felt like it wasn't as easy as I thought it would have been. But I didn't do too much of it. But my heart rate did spike up to like the mid 160s, or even a little bit under the 165, 164. So it was quite I'll say a shock for my body. And I felt like it was definitely a little bit harder than I expected. Even though it was easy, I thought it'd be easier. And then going on to the next 7 miles, which was planned to be 620s, I hit those miles at 628, 623, 625, 626, 629, 632, and 629. That 9th mile at the 632 was probably because of the incline that happened during the race, since it's rolling hills. And so again, hit those miles pretty bang on at 620s. And I think throughout these miles, I actually started to realize that my body was a little bit sore already. My legs were already feeling it, the glutes were feeling it. And so it was at this point where I thought, I don't know if I could start 615s per the strategy this soon. So I accepted that this was not going to be a 2:45 time. I'll just, again, go for that PR time. And I gave myself a little bit more time in the 620 paces before I started to kick a little bit faster up to the 615s as per my strategy was. And I put in another 3 miles of 620s before really speeding up to that 615. So I said to myself, okay, reach the half marathon mark and think about it again, see how you feel, and try putting in 615s and try that out. And if that doesn't work out, pull it back again. And so that's what I did. The next 3 miles that I ran up to the halfway mark was 625, 629, and 629. And so my heart rate did dip back down to the 150s or upper 150s. And so it was at that point I was like, okay, not bad. I feel a little bit better, but not entirely confident still about the 615s. So I started to push a little bit at the halfway mark at the 615 paces, and then I put in about 4 miles of it. And then I realized I really don't think I should put in another, I think it was 5 now by then, of 615s. So I really decided to pull it back after 4 miles at 615 to say, okay, tone it back, put it back to 620s, because that was the sustainable pace for me at the time. And so those 4 miles at 615s, those paces were at 615, 619, 622, and 618. My heart rate did go back up a little bit, understandably so, to around the low 160s. And then after that, I decided to pull it back. I think by this time, this was around mile 17. And so I was supposed to, put in another 6 miles or so before I hit that last 5K mark where I'll be into the threshold. So again, when I said how I felt early on about how my body was already feeling sore, I decided to pull it back and say no more 615s, let's settle with 620s. And so I went back down to 620s for the next, I think, 4 miles or so. Yeah. So I dialed it back for the next 4 miles or so at the 620 pace. So it was 629, 626, 625, and 624. And so that was up to mile 21, mile 22. And I felt fine. I think at that point, I felt, normal. I was clearly a little bit fatigued, but at the same time, still kind of pushed a little bit more. But that's when the infamous J Street Bridge kind of hits. And that was the wall that kind of really smacked my face. And so that's when I hit the wall pretty hard, going up that bridge around almost even a 7-minute per mile pace. And I allowed myself to do that. I didn't want to push myself too hard going up that bridge, and ended up, slowing down. And that really just gassed me out a little bit. And the next 4 miles from then was really not what I hoped for. I was hoping, again, to go into the threshold zone, hopefully speeding up to like 610s, 6-minute per mile paces, but obviously that was not gonna happen based off how I was. And so my pace actually dipped down even further to 630s for the next 4 miles. And so those times were 637, 632, and 635, and 632. So that was around mile 23 to 26. Around mile 25 was really when I started to realize I should pay attention to a little bit more on the overall time. I was very hyper-focused on how I was feeling, how I should adjust to how I was feeling. And so I didn't really look at my watch in terms of overall time. And so when I looked down at my watch at mile 25, I realized that I was really getting to the wire in terms of my PR time. And so that's when I, pushed a little bit more, but at the same time, I didn't exactly think that, oh, this is so close. I just thought, oh, I'll be around there, but it's close. And so I just continued on at that 6:30s pace. And then really at that mile 26 mark is when I realized, oh, shoot, this is actually really close. Because after hitting that 26 mile marker, you would think 400 meters left. But in reality, because of all the GPS signal discrepancies with the course, it was actually around 600 meters instead of 400. So doing a quick math, a general math, I thought, okay, this is way too close. I'm just gonna gun it. I'm just gonna go. Hopefully I'll PR, I don't know. So I went for it, and at that last 600 meters, I averaged like a 5:50 minute per mile pace. So I was really speeding up. My heart rate went up to 167, and so I sped up as hard as I can, went around that corner, saw the clock read flat, 2:50.00. And so I was like, oh, well, there goes my PR. But at the same time, I was like, but I'm gonna gun for that sub 250. Let's get another 250, sub 250. And so I still gunned it. Heard my brother on the side. I heard him, but I didn't know where he was. So you see in the finish line video of me, I started off pointing this way, thinking my brother was around there, but I wasn't sure. And then I turned it into a finishing pose where I went like this. So it was a pretty funny moment because you can hear my brother's voice faintly. It was so loud in that last spurt. That's how I finished at a finishing time of 2:49.53. And like I said before in the post-race chit chat that I did in my race video, oddly, after that race, I didn't feel like disappointed or mad at all. I knew it wasn't a PB, but at the same time, I was pretty happy about how I performed after the race. Maybe it was also the weather and the people that I was meeting too. The vibes were just so good. The weather was so nice too. And so it gave me like no reason to be mad about. And the time isn't bad at all as well. It's not a PB, but whatever, right? So I think I was very satisfied and happy about the time despite not being a PB. Had I known sooner about my PB being that close, maybe I could have put in a last spurt a little bit early on, but who knows, right? I think I could have, but I think that's kind of the con of running by feel. Sometimes it's good because you don't want to explode, you don't want to over push yourself where you end up injuring. But I think marathoning is really just finding that balance. You want to push your limits, you want to know your limits so that you can always try to improve and push the boundaries of how your body is able to run. And so I really went that route in terms of going by feel this run, and maybe was falling short a little bit because I was going by feel. But I'm not complaining at all. I'm very happy about how I performed, how I executed, how I responded to how my body was feeling based off, all the niggles and all the I guess uncertainty that I was dealing with. So not complaining about it, but ultimately a very fun race for me, very positive vibe race with a lot of people coming up to me. And I always say this, I'm always so grateful when that happens. I'm just like a normal Asian dude running around and documenting my life on these races. And for someone like you guys to just show up and say, hey, I watch your videos, that is always so mind-blowing to me. But I think that really added to the post-race vibes that made me really happy and not care about my PB time. Final stats, like I said before, finishing time was 2:49.53. Average heart rate was actually pretty low. It was at 159. Again, I think this is something that I think I could improve on because I feel like that's like my mental barrier for me where I could probably push more, but I'm not realizing that my body could take more. My mental, I guess, threshold is probably suppressing it. I don't know. That's something that I need to figure out on my own. I think that I could race a little bit more and see where that line is, and maybe I'll find it to be, higher where I could speed up more. Maybe not. So that comes with a lot of improvements that I could implement and practice on. But average heart rate 159, average pace was 628. First half of the marathon was a 125.09. Second half was a 124.44. So negative split. So that's something that I'm proud of as well. I think for the past few marathons, I didn't negative split. So negative splitting is definitely a better feeling than positive splitting. So happy that I've done that. Could I have done better overall in this race? Probably, yeah. But again, probably not. You don't really know after these races, but I'm very proud of myself on actually how I performed and executed that race. So overall, I give myself a meets expectation goal. You may be like thinking, why are you giving a meets expectation goal if your expectation was to PR and you didn't PR? And so the reason why I'm giving myself a meets expectation is because of the circumstances that I was in. I give myself the expectation, or I give myself a goal. Let's call it that, a goal of PRing. If I don't meet that goal, that doesn't mean that I meet my expectation, or I don't meet my expectation. My expectation going to the race was hopefully a sub 245, but at the same time, realistically around that 249 time, my PR time. And given the circumstances of how I was feeling, how I trained, the marathon training, and all that kind of brought me back down to be more realistic about my own expectations. And so I did the best I can. I did exceptionally well in my performance in terms of execution, I think. And so that kind of brings it to a meets expectation, so the below meets expectation. So it's not all about just black and white time for me, but it's just about how I perform overall, despite not meeting that numerical value. So it's not all about the metrics for me personally. It's a very personal goal for myself in terms of effort level, in terms of execution and performance. And so not meeting that kind doesn't mean not expectation. So that's how I had my standards. Very happy about how I performed this race, and I'm happy to say that I have redeemed myself for CIM. And so it really gave me a very good sense of the running community once again at this race. There's just so many people coming by and saying hi. I actually met a lot of my friends, the All Heart family crew, that were just chatting over Cacao and Strava. And so finally meeting them is such a blessing, or a feeling of like you haven't seen a friend in a long time. And so everyone was so heartwarming. Everyone was cheering for one another. It was just positive vibes all over the place. And so that made my non-PB race even better. Weather was great. Sacramento was great. Foliage was beautiful. And so all that kind of added up to one of the best experiences in a race that I've done so far in terms of racing. And I am excited to race more next year and really gun for that 245 time in the next few months at LA Marathon. So that's my next race. Hopefully I'll get that time, but if not, I'll try again. I'll keep trying. And so fun race, and I'm happy to share that experience with everyone. And I'm happy that I documented this because I try to document my memories, the cherished memories, and I want to share that as well. And so thanks for sticking along, and hopefully you guys will continue to run, continue to support one another, and I'll see you guys in LA Marathon, maybe.